You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. The Manitoba Chamber Orchestra begins their 51st season by welcoming famed concert pianist Awadagin Pratt to the Crescent Arts Centre. The pianist, conductor, and professor performs music of Jesse Montgomery and Johann Sebastian Bach alongside the MCO and their music director, Ann Manson. I'm thrilled to say Awadagin Pratt has joined me in the Classic 107 studio. Welcome to Classic 107.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here, and welcome to Winnipeg. Have you been to town before?
I'm pretty sure it was here. This is on the line, I think, from Toronto to Vancouver, train.
You did the train line?
I did the train. And,
no way.
Stopped here, and I think, as you were mentioning Stella's, I was like, wait a minute, I think we may have had breakfast at Stella's.
Yeah, we were just chatting before we started recording about good places to eat here in town, because you're a bit of a foodie. And Stella's always a good place for breakfast. I've never done that train trip. What's that like, traveling across Canada in a coach?
Largely... well, there are two things. So one, you're getting cited for freight with some frequency. I like the train, but it's largely boring in terms of vistas until you get into the mountains and Banff, and so that part was exciting. And then from there west is actually pretty wonderful. But I think it was 3 or 4 days. I can't remember. But yeah, it was nice. I like the train. So
yeah, it's a beautiful way to travel.
Nice
I've done it in Europe, but never done it in Canada. But like you say, it's pretty flat from northwestern Ontario until you hit Calgary area. But hey, what a cool way to see the country, and what a thrill to have you here in town for an MCO debut.
Yep.
How's that feel?
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
That's awesome.
Looking forward to it. Yeah.
I mean, you're one of those players who's performed with orchestras around the world of seemingly every size. You've been a concert soloist. You've led from the keyboard. You've been on the podium. What's it like for those who haven't done that and had that experience? Mm-hmm. What's it like walking into a room of musicians for the first time? And do you get right down to business, or do you kind of chat a little bit and get a feel for things?
Usually I'm there a little bit early, warming up as the musicians are coming on stage, and obviously by that point I would have met with the conductor to go through the score a little bit, and then so I might chat with whomever is sort of in the vicinity of the piano. A lot of places I have friends that are in the orchestra, so we'll chat and stuff. But you pretty much, once it's whatever hour or clock it is the rehearsal starts, it's right down to business.
How have rehearsals been going with the MCO and Ann Manson?
We don't start till this afternoon.
Oh, so it's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
Oh, well, how fun is that? Well, it's a big deal to have you here. Kicking off the second half of the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra's first 100 years. That's their 51st concert season.
Oh, wow.
So, no pressure
right,
or anything like that. You're performing two works with which you're intimately familiar, and I want to start by talking about contemporary composer Jesse Montgomery and her work Rounds. Now, her music is rather well known in these parts. We've heard it as part of the Winnipeg New Music Festival put on by the WSO. Agassiz Chamber Music Festival just performed a few of her works a few months back. You commissioned her for this work, part of a larger project and CD, which we're going to get to. But can we start just by talking about what drew you to her and her music?
So I met Jesse, it's probably 5-6 years ago by now, playing chamber music in Sitka, Alaska. We were playing Schumann Quintet. She was a violinist, principally at that time, violinist of the Catalyst String Quartet. And she was sort of composing on the side, but she was contemplating the switch to full-time composing. And so we're up there in Sitka. A friend of mine, Zool Bailey, runs the series there, and we're in this house. There's 6 of us, and there's nothing to do in Sitka after about 8 o'clock or so, and so we're always just talking and drinking milk through the rest of the night. And so I came to know Jesse, and I thought, if I ever had was a very brilliant and powerful mind, and I thought if I had the chance to commission her to write something that I would ask her. So I was very fortunate. I sent in timing, in a way, I sent her a text message if she'd be interested, and she's like, yeah. And then further communications, and she wasn't responding. And then another communication saying, look, I really need to, know. And she said, please, contact my manager. And she just got a new manager. I was like, oh, no, it just got more expensive.
Yeah.
But we got her before she became the composer in residence for Chicago Symphony,
Yeah.
so it was still attainable. But yeah, so we have a nice friendship, and I love playing the piece, and it's been very well received.
Yeah, I was reading some of those reviews, and like you say, very well received. A 2022 commission. You've performed it plenty, I think more than, alongside 30 plus orchestras at this
we're
point?
just at about 30. It's maybe 27, 28. I was keeping count for a while. But
Yeah, but then you just start to lose track.
yeah,
I mean,
it's just a lot,
you've given this work plenty of exposure, and I mean, it's obviously a work that you've lived with for a long time. I'm curious, has your relationship with this piece changed over those nearly 30 performances?
Yeah, I mean, I've keep discovering in the way that that you further examine, say, Bach or Beethoven, getting into a piece and keep continuing to look at it, you find other things. It's different facets of craft that are really kind of compelling and interesting. And to the extent that it's the same way in a Beethoven, does it really? How does it affect the listener if I this articulation versus that is not a quantifiable thing in just that one moment, but cumulatively. So you, as a performer, accumulating more, understanding of how the work was composed and makes it, I think, more compelling for the listener. But emotionally, in sort of the emotional landscape of the piece, I think it's roughly, it's very clear cut what it is. But there are, I think what changes the most are what colors the orchestra is bringing in a given moment that I can play into and around. And that creates a good deal of variety across the performances. And then, of course, the cadenza, which is... which I basically, she hadn't written one and was in the process of doing it, and I like to improvise, so I was already sort of improvising with ideas, and I sent her a minute. She's like, oh, that sounds good, and she was going to start transcribing that, and I sent another minute, and she was like, okay, that sounds good too, why don't you just do it? And so I did, and then I would say about, on a given night, 10 to 20% of it is improvised, and so that's a whole other. So my the manner in which I dig into the material, a lot of that, those nuances, the things that I find, reveal themselves in the cadenza as well. So. Yeah.
You've been touring this work. You've committed at least one performance to recording. It just dropped a couple of weeks ago, August 25th. Yeah. Congrats on the record, Still Point.
Thank you.
I'm curious, this is your first album in 12 years or something like that. Yeah. What made you not only want to get back into the studio and record, but record a series of commissions?
Yeah, it was born out of a desire to have new music be more integrated into my concert life, and as I looked at, so it's 2022 was 30 years of a career, and what's the next chunk look like, and so I'd had, let's see, 2 concertos written for me previously, and I commissioned another composer in chamber music and used to do more new music in chamber music and in conducting the works of student composers when I was in school, but hadn't really engaged in the new music community. And so my friend Mark Rabideau is very much in the forefront of or knowledgeable about what's new and what's good, and so I was judging a thing when he was at DePauw with Judd Greenstein at New Amsterdam, and so he and I had a nice long chat, and this kind of gave birth to this Still Point.
Well, it really is a beautiful disc. So congrats on
Thank
it.
you.
It is very, very exciting. Roomful of Teeth on the record, who've also been to town, actually, fun fact.
Sweet.
Yeah, and Far Cry as well, the orchestra, Chamber Orchestra. And so, again, these are all sort of ruminations on T.S. Eliot and a particular bit of his poetry, and sort of imagining that next step for you and your trajectory as an artist and a musician. Just to catch listeners up, yours is a pretty incredible bio, which I'm sure you've heard before, and you lived it, but let me just catch them up anyways. The first to triple major in piano, violin conducting at the prestigious Peabody Institute. In, as you mentioned, 92, won the Naumburg International Piano Competition, and then 2 years later, an Avery Fisher Career Grant. You performed at the White House 3 times for 2 presidents, and for millions of kids on Sesame Street. These are accolades that follow you throughout your career. I'm sure every interviewer brings them up for every single chat you have. So rather than diving into any of those, like, I'm curious, was this the dream when you started to play piano? Like, is this where you envisioned yourself 30 years later in this career since 92, but even before that?
Yeah, no, I grew up in a small town, Bloomington Normal, Illinois, and there was a symphony there, and so whomever I knew as a concert artist came through to play as a soloist with the orchestra. And I think my last 2 years in high school, I played violin in the orchestra, so I was sort of up close. But I didn't know anything about anything. Like, we didn't go to Chicago for concerts or anything. And so then I started school, and, I started as a violin major. I had wanted to be a double major in Illinois. University of Illinois didn't allow it, and my violin teacher knew the violin teacher at Illinois, and that's how that happened.
Yeah.
And then eventually I was able to study piano there with a professor. But I transferred to Peabody, and the thing was like everybody wanted me to stop doing the 2 instruments, right? And I was keen that I didn't want to be forced to make that decision, that I wanted to continue studying both instruments. And I auditioned for Cleveland, and they accepted me as a pianist and not a violinist. New England Conservatory accepted me as a violinist and not a pianist, and then Peabody accepted me as both. So I went to Peabody, and my goal. It's actually funny. There was a thing I did in, I think it was 1990. It was a Beethoven, or 89 American Pianists Association. It was called Beethoven then, I think, Beethoven Foundation or something, where there was a little interview, and I'd said, like, all I want is to have a career as a musician. And the guy was like, well, if only we could believe him, because everybody was so keen on it. Like, I want to be the next, Horowitz or whatever, which was not part of my thing at all. And so. No, I didn't. I guess ironic. I don't know, but I never had dreams of Carnegie Hall. I never had dreams of any of those places and things that I've done. But I wanted, I just loved music and loved music intensely, and wanted to be engaged with it, as what I did in my life. And so, as the year that I won Naumburg, I was also up for a affiliate artist Exxon conducting thing, which was a thing then, and I'd stopped practicing the violin probably like in 89, 90. I was in a string quartet for a little while in school, but I was just looking for whatever way to get my foot in the door.
Yeah, it was just about making music and doing it.
Yeah, and so I won Naumburg, and all this stuff was there. There were concerts immediately.
We're not talking about 1 or 2. We're talking about like 50 concerts or something like that, right?
The first season was probably like 20 or 30, and the next was 50, and then before you know it, like 2 years later, I think was the first New York Phil concert, and all these things, and I was ready. I embraced all that, but it's not like I'm fulfilling my life's dream in the sense of those accomplishments. Fulfilling my life's dream in the sense of being a musician.
Music. You're doing it.
Yeah. And so it's been, what can I say? It's been, phenomenal.
Yeah, what a ride.
Yeah.
What a ride. You're in town, if you're just tuning in. I'm chatting with Awadagin Pratt, pianist, in town to perform with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra to kick off their 2023-24 concert season. We started out this conversation chatting a little bit about Jesse Montgomery after we got off of Stella's and train travels across Canada. One quick question about that. Are you going to be leading from the keyboard for that performance of Rounds?
No.
No. Okay, cool. So Ann Manson's going to be up on the podium.
Yes.
Also on the program is Bach leading from the keyboard there, or is Ann going to be leading
I
as
think
well?
She's conducting as well.
Oh, very, very fun that'll be. I mean, obviously, one of the three Bs, a staple in the repertoire. Can you tell us about your relationship with old Johann Sebastian?
Yeah, I have always kind of gravitated towards Bach. Bach has always been part of, excuse me, I think a lot of students are intimidated by fugues, and I just always gravitated towards them, and I loved them. And then, I had was inspired a lot in my late teen years by Glenn Gould, and really listened. Well, here we are in Canada.
Yeah, which recording?
Yeah. Well, yeah, starting with the Goldbergs, but kind of everything, and radio. All his radio stuff is incredible. So I've always been in Bach, and I recorded the concertos, some of these concertos
with the St. Lawrence String
St.
Quartet.
Lawrence String Quartet, which was really exciting. So I've had a relationship with this piece for a long time, and when I was programming, or when my manager was programming rounds, it's 15 minutes. It's not short, but it's not full concerto length as far as artistic administrators are concerned. And so it was Boston with the Nelsons that came up with the idea, or asked or inquired about a short concerto, and maybe, I can't remember if they were asking specifically about Bach or whether I offered Bach, but it actually works as a perfect pairing. And in fact, as I was back and forth with the A major and F minor and this and that, and but motivically, the first three notes, E, A, G, are the same. There's a G sharp in the Bach, but it's funny because it was not intended. I didn't, but they actually, it's really interesting that they work together in that fashion as well.
Like you just said, you've recorded plenty of his music. You've performed it regularly. You've taught it to students. I'm wondering about your approach to Bach himself. I mean, you mentioned Glenn Gould, known as a radical. You bring it up here in Canada. And this is a concert that's billed as a mind-blowing rendition of Bach with the MCO. Is that marketing hype, Awadagin? Or is there actually going to be something a little bit radical about it?
Well, I don't know. Someone's mind might be blown away.
That's the goal of good performance, right? Should be mind-blowing for somebody.
Yeah.
But what about your take and approach?
I don't think that I do anything. I don't think I do anything, extraordinary or unusual. I played it with Nick McGeegan this summer at Aspen, and so I was. He's a renowned Baroque specialist, and I was curious. I've never worked with somebody who was specialized in that, and so I was curious if I'd been missing something. And he enjoyed what I was doing, so I don't, so it's not radical, but it sounds good.
Yeah,
I think I think what I'm doing sounds good.
Yeah, no, but I think that I
have ornament. I ornament. I play the continuo parts where possible, and I think it's informed by Baroque practice, but performed on the piano.
Yeah. It's not a historically informed performance. It's not a hip performance, but it's informed by that practice.
Right.
I think like you say, there doesn't need to be something mind-blowing. You don't need to be, I don't know, doing something where you're playing cross hands all the time or something, or playing things backwards or inverted, or adding your own fugue on top of something else. But just that idea of a live performance in and of itself is pretty special, right? And that's the goal. I feel like that's the reason why we go to these live performances, is because there is something mind-blowing about just being there, seeing the music.
Energy,
and seeing all those people make this music together, whether it's brand new music like Jesse Montgomery's work or Johann Sebastian Bach's work, there's that thread in terms of performance.
Right.
So what a way to kick off this 2023-24 MCO season. Awadagin, thanks so much for joining me in the Classic 107 studio today.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much.